Hello students, I am Dr. Saliha Jamal, Faculty Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Welcome to today's class. So we are in the series where we are now discussing the case studies that is related with the extreme weather events, extreme climate events mainly impacted by the climate change. So today's topic of discussion is Glacial Lake Outburst. This is the case study 1 of this week. When we say glacial lake outburst, first we should see some of the related facts, data, which highlights that the glacial lakes are growing rapidly, not only in numbers but even in size. The reason for this is the climate change and the glacial retreat. If we see the statistics from different weather stations or from the data received from the different organizations, we see that due to the temperature rise because of global warming, changing pattern in the precipitation, that both parallelly have contributed in the rise of number of glaciers and even the size of the glaciers. Generally, we attribute this rise in number and size of glacier due to the rise in temperature because of global warming, because of which we can say the number of the glacial lakes are increasing, the size of the glacial lakes are increasing, and as we are concerned here with the glaciers, so the high mountainous regions are increasingly at risk from the glacial related hazards. So three things is to be remembered here. Because of increase in temperature, because of global warming, the number of glacial lakes are increasing, the size of the glacial lakes are increasing, and as we are talking about the glaciers, so the mountainous areas are mainly at risk due to the glacial related hazards. Generally, in short form, it is abbreviated as GLOFs, GLOFs. And if we see, there are GLOFs through which we can give certain examples from the different regions like Ganga Basin, that is mainly from the Himalayan region, the Alps, the Central Caucasus, Alaska, and the Eastern Himalayas. So, among the hazards associated with the glaciers, if we talk about glacial lake outburst flood is one of the most disastrous event that we can say it is such type of hazards which leads to a severe disaster. So, glacial lake outburst flood hazards can arise from both, we can say, the internal and the external forces. Both these forces can cause the glacial lake outburst hazard. If we talk about the external variables, the forces which are working externally, that may include the temperature changes, may include the changing pattern of the precipitation, and also these temperature and precipitation pattern changes, this affects the snow buildup and the melting of ice which feeds the glacial lakes. Certainly, if the temperature will rise, snow melting will take place, glaciers will melt, and it will add more volume of water to the glaciers. That's why among the external forces, temperature and changing pattern of precipitation play a very important role. If we see certain high resolution satellite imagery or even from the geomorphological data which indicates that if we see the previous decades data, just assume from 1930s, then there have been hundreds of glacial lake outburst flood risk in the third pole. Studies have shown that climate change significantly contributes to the GLOF hazard. So, before proceeding, first we should understand what are glacial lake outburst. When we are talking about glacial lake outburst, already we have talked about what are glacial lakes. Then glacial lake outburst floods are simply a type of outburst flood that can occur when a dam, or we can say the surrounding which holds the glacial lake, it generally breaks or breached out. That causes glacial lake outburst. In simple words, it can be understood as these are the type of outburst flood that occur when a dam that contains a glacier lake breaks. Means mainly the surrounding the dam, or even many times the moraines generally dam the glacier lake. If they break or if they are breached, then we can say the glacial lake outburst hazards occur. So a GLOF-like phenomena, which is also known as yokolap, that is, you can see here, it is just like a glacial lake outburst flood-like phenomena, which is known as yokolap. It occurs when a body of water which is confined by the glaciers that melts, or even that body of water overflows the glacier. So there are different types of glacier lake. We can say there is a supraglacial lake. If we say supraglacial lake, it means the glacier on the top of the glacial lake on the top of the glaciers. That is known as superglacial or supraglacial lake. There are, we can say, moraine dammed glacial lake. Moraine dammed glacial lakes, when the glacial lake is surrounded or dammed by the moraines. Moraines are the sediments deposited by the glacier melting. So when it is surrounded or dammed by the moraines, then it is known as moraine dammed lake. Glacier lakes are many times also that is a flow of water. When it is obstructed by the glaciers, then also it is regarded as glacier lakes. So there are different types of, we can say, glacial lakes, like supraglacial lakes, we can say, or moraine dammed lake, or we can say glacier lakes where the glacier obstructs the water flow. So similarly, a glacial lake outburst flood situation is also known as yokolap, where when a body of water confined by a glacier melts or overflows the glacier. So that is a similar phenomena which is also known as yokolap. Then this failure, or we can say break in the we can say the dam of the glacier, or we can say the surrounding of the glacier, are generally caused by the various reasons. It may be the earthquake, volcanic eruptions beneath the ice, erosion, built up of water pressure due to the immense melting of ice, or a rock or heavy snow avalanche. These are some of the reasons through which the breakage in the dam takes place. Here in this diagram, you can see clearly the landslide and even the avalanche. This is taking place, means it is adding during the big rock chunks are added in the glacial lake, which destabilizes the water, and either water may overflow, or either this dam may be breached or it may break and glacial lake outburst flood may occur. Similarly, here you can say the chunk of snow chunk of ice from the glacier which comes, it adds immense volume of water at an instant, due to which the lake may create pressure on the dam, and this dam may break and glacial lake outburst floods may occur. So there are various reasons for that. Areas with the glaciers are generally susceptible to flooding from the glacial lake outburst flood because of rising glacial melting, and this rising glacial melting is taking place because of climate change related environmental consequences. One of the example here you can see as permafrost melting. Mainly the areas which are more susceptible with the flooding of glacial lake outburst floods, they comes under the vulnerable zone affected by the climate change. So as we have understood in previous slides, one of the major reason why this glacial lake outburst flood takes place because of glacial melting, and the reason of this glacial melting is global warming, which means there is an increase in the global temperature. The average increase in the global temperature is some 1.1 degrees centigrade or even 1.2 to 3 degrees centigrade. That differs in various regions. Somewhere it is more and somewhere it is less. Overall, global warming is the main cause for the rise in the glacial melting. You can take example, especially which is true in Himalayas, where the geologies are even more active, means external pressure is also there, glacial melting is taking place due to the climate change, we can say, and even the geologies there are more active. If we see to the study of 2023, which estimate that this danger poses almost 15 million people, mostly in China, India, Nepal, Pakistan and Peru at risk. So, how climate change and glacial retreat are related to each other? When we will see this, we will find here that accelerating this climate change means we are talking about the global warming. We are talking about the increase in the global temperature, which is generally estimated approximately 1.1 degree centigrade. This global warming is accelerating the melting of glacier, especially in the high mountainous region. You can give examples of Himalayas, Andes, Alps, etc. Not only the melting of glaciers are taking place, but due to this melting, the glaciers are shrinking as a result of the higher temperature, and even we can say reduction in the snowfalls in many of the regions. Here, thus, such phenomena leads to the glacier retreat. Means on one hand, global warming is taking place, means the global temperature is rising. This rise in global temperature melting the glaciers, and the glacier size are even, we can say, shrinking, and even in certain regions reductions in the snowfall have been observed. Thus, as these glaciers retreat, they leave behind certain depressions. When they will melt, when they will retreat, they will leave behind a certain depression that will be filled by the melt water from the glaciers, and that forms glacial lakes. Due to the ongoing glacier melt, due to the high temperature, many glacial lakes are expanding in volume and surface area, thus increasing the risk of outburst flood. So, climate change is playing very important role in glacial retreat. Overall, we can say glacial lake outburst floods. This picture highlights the warming seas are accelerating Greenland's glacial retreat. You can see here this one, that warming seas are accelerating Greenland's glacial retreat. And what is the reason behind the warming of seas or rising temperature of sea? That is simply, we can say, that is attributed to global warming. What factors that triggers a glacial lake outburst flood? Already we have talked about, but here we will discuss one by one. Among the factors, the first most important factor is, that is, melting of glaciers. What triggers a glacial lake outburst flood? We have already talked about the various factors. Here we are going to discuss one by one. Among the most important factors, melting of glaciers play a very important role. Because of global temperature rise, glaciers are melting faster, which is leading to rapid accumulation of water in the glacial lake, and that will create pressure on the dams of the glacier. The excessive water pressure on the natural moraine dam, or even we can say glaciated dam, which holds the lake, can cause it to burst. Means that addition of extra water at faster rate, that will create pressure on the moraine dam or glaciated dam, due to which the glacial outburst flood may take place. Second most important triggering factor is landslide and avalanches. Already we have talked about by explaining this landslide and avalanches in previous slide through the picture. When the large chunks of ice or rock fall into the lake, it creates waves and displaces water, which can overtop, or even this large chunk of ice and rock can destabilize the dam. Even when the large chunk of rock or ice falls in a glacial lake, this sudden influx of the material in the glacial lake can cause the lake to breach its containment, causing the glacial lake outburst flood. Here you can observe how the large chunk of ice and even the rocks landslide is coming down. You can see when this large chunk of ice or rocks are immensely added in the glacial lake, it can create pressure on the dam, on the moraines, and this will breach out. When this will breach out, glacial lake outburst will take place. Third most important factor is heavy rainfall and snow melt. Because intense and prolonged rainstorm, it is very much obvious that will add immense volume of water to the glacial lake, which will stress the moraine dam, causing the failure, even the breaching of the dam. Not only this, a sudden rise in temperature during the warmer months that can lead melting of the snow at a faster rate, which adds to the lake's volume and risk of overflow created. So, heavy rain and snow melt is also one of the triggering factor for the GLOF. Similarly, earthquake, they can shake and they can destabilize the moraine dam, causing cracks or weakening of the structure, leading to the breach. So, that can also create GLOFs. So, as we are concerned here with the case study, in this lecture we have taken Uttarakhand Glacial Lake Outburst. Although Uttarakhand experienced intermittently several glacial lake outburst, but here we will be talking about the glacial lake outburst of 2013, also known as Kedarnath disaster. If you remember, students, it occurred in June 2013 at midday, when the cloud burst centered on the North Indian state of Uttarakhand. That cloud burst mainly centered on the North Indian state of Uttarakhand, that caused major floods and the landslides in the different pockets, making it one of the biggest and natural disaster to strike the country if we compare it from 2004 tsunami. The rainfall was far more significant in this region than the state usually received in the past. So, it was very much high during this time. It is very much high from the normal, when the state usually what it receives, if we have observed the data. So much due to this flood situation, a large amount of debris that impeded in the rivers, causing overflow of the rivers. This 2013 flood in Uttarakhand is regarded as one of the deadliest natural catastrophe in Indian history, which killed over 6,000 people, even more than that. Just give a look, this the glacial lake outburst here. You can see here an emerging risk mainly in the Himalayas, because we are talking about the Uttarakhand glacial lake outburst that occurred in 2013, the 2013 Kedarnath disaster, and it was one of the most devastating example of glacial lake outburst flood. That's why I have taken this as a case study in today's lecture, in which almost 6,000 people were killed. And if we see the risk in the Himalayan region, the Himalayas mostly hold 5,000 glacial lake. It holds 5,000 glacial lake, out of which 200 lakes are exposed to the risk of overflowing, means the risk of glacial lake outburst flood is mostly observed in around 200 glacial lakes. This increased risk of GLOFs is attributed to the atmospheric warming due to the climate change. Thus, how we relate that GLOFs, how it is related to the climate change because of the atmospheric warming. Now, when we see the origin of this Uttarakhand GLOF, it occurred in June 16, 2013. A distinctive cyclonic circulation developed around the low pressure system. Means cyclonic circulation developed around the low pressure system, and this cyclonic circulation was intensified due to the moisture from the Bay of Bengal and from the Arabian Sea, and even it is more intensified by the western disturbances from the north. Means just a cyclonic circulation developed that will not cause such devastating GLOF condition. But this the thing is here to give importance is this cyclonic circulation which developed around a low pressure system that was intensified from the moisture of Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, and even it was more intensified by the western disturbances from the north, which altogether resulted in a very much heavy rainfall, round about 375% of the benchmark rainfall during a normal monsoon in Uttarakhand and its neighboring territories. These all situation all together that resulted in a very much high rainfall, very much high if we compare it from the average rainfall what usually the state receives. As a result, 3800 meter high Chorabari glaciers, you can see here, result of this situation caused 38 meter high Chorabari glacier that melted and Mandakini river crested, again which resulted in a heavy rainfall in the nearby areas. If we see nearby areas of Uttarakhand, that the national capital region, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and even some parts of the Tibet were affected, as well as flooding was also observed in the Gobind Ghat, Kedar, Dom, Rudraprayag district, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh and western Nepal areas. You can see how much devastating the situation was. This is the picture, broken end of footbridge over the Mandakini river at Rudraprayag Sangam. Now, what were the climatic and environmental causes of this extreme event that occurred in Uttarakhand? That I would like to here quote a study that was conducted by the Utah State University, who utilized different remote analysis from the different remote sensing satellite imageries, and it utilized various simulations in order to investigate the natural and the anthropogenic factors affecting the climate anomalies. And they found that the June rainfall in the northern India has almost risen very much if we compare it from 1980s. And this increase in the rainfall appears to correlate with the propensity of intensified short waves in the upper troposphere. Again, synchronizing this intensified short waves is very much associated with the heightened concentration of aerosols and the greenhouse gases. So, these situations created anomalies. We can say the factors, both the natural and even the anthropogenic factors, altogether played a very important role, where this intensified short wave synchronized and very much associated with the heightened concentration of aerosol and greenhouse gases that caused extreme rainfall, we can say, and even the glacial melting was also very much observed. So, this extreme weather was partly linked to the shifting monsoon pattern and increased variability due to the climate change what we are observing nowadays. So, finding out certain climatic and environmental causes, it was found the rising temperature is one of the cause in the Himalayan region that caused glaciers to retreat at a very alarming rate. Even according to the data, we have observed that the rate of glacier melting have increased a lot if we compare it from the previous decade. The increased frequency and intensity of such event is very much related to the global warming, which destabilizes the fragile mountain ecosystem. So, rising temperature is one of the very much important cause. That's why the lake formed by the Chorabari glacier breached its moraine, which was again exacerbated by the increased melting of the glaciers due to the rising temperature, and that led to the creation of larger, more unstable glacial lakes in the region. Means rising temperature of Chorabari glaciers that breached out, and it was again exacerbated due to the high rate of melting of the glaciers due to the rising temperature, and that led to the creation of larger and more unstable glacial lakes in the region. Certain rescue operations was held just like the Indian Army, Air Force, Navy, Indo-Tibetan Border Police, NDRF, Public Works Department, local authorities all worked together for efficient rescue operations. Even several thousand troops were deployed for the purpose, and political and social organizations, activists were also engaged for this, and even the individuals were also extricated by the helicopter. So, these are the some of the rescue operations which have been noted. This picture reveals how Indo-Tibetan border police rescuing the stranded pilgrims cross a river which is swollen by the flood waters at Govind Ghat in Chamoli district in Uttarakhand. You can see the situation, how the rescue operation is going on. What are the human impacts of the Uttarakhand GLOF? If we see the human impact regarding the death toll, already we have discussed that approximately 6,000 people were presumed to be dead, and the dead bodies were recovered not only on those dates but even in the first wave of rescue operation, second wave, third wave, fourth wave of search activities. Various deceased bodies were recovered. There was displacement and loss of livelihoods if we see, because it is one of the tourist place, and lots of devastation which took place due to this disaster halted the tourism of the place for a certain period. Even the local communities who were dependent on the agriculture, that was also hit hard, because the flood destroyed the crops and even the livestock. The market town, and we can say which functioned as a transit point of the Kedarnath, that was also entirely obliterated. You can see here pictures, the before situation of the region, the images of devastation mainly by this particular disaster. Kedarnath temple website you can see here. Just imagine this is the previous situation before the disaster occurred, and see the situation after the disaster. Just seeing at a glance, you can analyze how much disaster took place. There was several infrastructure damage regarding the healthcare centers. It destroyed homes, schools, several villages, etc. Even it destroyed a key artery, National Highway 7, which is now regarded as the formerly National Highway 58, that was also obliterated in multiple areas. Not only the human impacts, while analyzing the environmental impacts, it was found that the severe river bank erosion took place. River banks were eroded, river systems such as, if we talk about Mandakini, if we talk about Alaknanda, Bhagirathi, these river systems experienced extreme sedimentation, even changing their courses and destabilizing the nearby ecosystem. Regarding the environmental impacts, destruction of the vegetation and forest was also observed, because large tract of forested and vegetated areas was washed away by the powerful flood waters, leaving soil very much exposed and vulnerable for further erosion. The loss of plant cover that intensified even the landslide risks in this region, which is already a geologically unstable area, means increasing the severity regarding the landslide. Soil degradation and loss of arable land was observed because the inundation of fertile agricultural land with lots of debris, silt and various glacial sediments that reduced the soil fertility, impacted the farmers' livelihood, and crop yield was reduced. It was reduced in the coming years also. Impact, if we see its impact on the mountainous ecosystem, we know that fragile high altitude ecosystems were destabilized with the collapse of the natural barriers and increased glacial retreat due to the climate change. So overall, it impacted the glacial and the mountainous ecosystem. And as we are talking about the Uttarakhand GLOF, it also impacted other regions like National Capital Region, Uttar Pradesh, in Himachal Pradesh, Nepal, which was affected by even the flooding. Several deaths were also reported. Various pilgrims and tourists were of these places, and reports even indicate in Nepal 128 residents and 13 governmental structures were obliterated, rendering more than 1,000 individuals homeless. So it impacted also the nearby regions. Just see effect of flood in Darchula district in Nepal. See just what is the effect of flood in this district. So the thing here, we just took the example of 2013 Glacial Lake Outburst Flood. But what I have said, this region intermittently experienced several events of Glacial Lake Outburst Flood. Here you can see the several articles from the newspapers and different sources which points out for example, Rishi Ganga project washed away by glacier burst in Uttarakhand official. Another very much disastrous glacial lake outburst took place in 2021, of which what the experts cite. Here Uttarakhand glacier burst. Experts cite impact of climate crisis. Just think, we have related it with the climate crisis. It means the climate change is very much related, directly related with the glacial lake outburst. Why it is very much related? Because due to the climate change, global warming is taking place. Global warming is responsible for the increase in the global temperature, and this increase in the temperature proceeds towards and it increases the rate of glacier melting. Due to this glacier melting, glacier lakes are increasing, glacier size are shrinking, glacier lake areas are expanding, which is creating pressure on its dam, whether made up of we can say moraine or even the glacier, and due to this pressure, that dams and moraines may breached out, which causes the glacier lake outburst. So it is very much related with the climate change. So that's all for today's class, student. Have a nice day. Thank you.